Hello and welcome to this lecture on Adobe Photoshop by Eduonix. In this lecture we're going to be talking about the art history brush and the history brush, and these are pretty useful. So I'm going to take a portrait because it's one I don't see often in tutorials. So here we have this person as an example, and I'm just going to make some corrections real quick. Let's say I'm just going to stamp out some things. I'll change some of the colors. This is all just a setup to show you what the art history brush does. That's good. I'll get her teeth because that'll be a good example. Let's see, I go overboard in the eyes too. I just make this a really freaky person. Well, the good thing is that with my history panel open and art history brush, the art brush as well, start out with showing you, you can paint from an actual history state, and we do that by selecting one of these. So if I go back to the original, if you remember from the history tutorial, I can and I had to deselect everything, but I can go and select the original image, which was nothing because we pasted a photo in. I can go back to the first quick selection, and I can literally paint, and what it's doing is it's pulling it from this quick selection. If I go back and actually go back, you can see the original color of the teeth, in which case I'd be getting rid of some of this orange. But since I use destructive editing, the way that I'm actually doing it is painting from the original image. This is kind of the same if you were to use another image on top of itself, and that, let's say this one was this one's all green, and I want some of the orange to show through, and I would just literally erase part of this picture. But the art history brush enables us to do this in retrospect, without having actually prepared for anything. It's a way of basically using the history, but only using part of it. And so this tool will come up a lot if you're thinking of it. And if you're not thinking of it, you might be stuck sometimes and you won't know exactly the best way to go back and do something. But the art history brush is, obviously, it's a really good way of utilizing history without entirely going back and redoing what you're doing. It comes in handy a lot if you overdid something, you went over the lines, and it's still in your history states. It's a pretty useful tool there. And forgive me if I was calling it the art history brush. If you look at the options panel up above, what changes when you go to the art history brush? You still have all the brush stuff, except in this case you have a style. You have always use pressure for opacity, which just has to do with pressure sensitive tablets. You have area and tolerance. Now let's take a look at what this does. So the two are actually quite different, and I'm going to start changing the color of this dramatically so that you can really tell what's going on. Let's just colorize one and make it okay, blue. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a filter on it too. Let's put one of these from the filter gallery. One with actual color. There we go. So, as you can see, you kind of get an idea of what it does. I'll just put the style on dab, and we have all these different styles, which only correspond to this art history brush. So as you can see, I have quick selection selected, kind of the last one. Let's see what happens. Let's have hue saturation. So this will go back to where it was just blue. And there, as you can see, even though I've covered this area, everything keeps changing. And if I hold my brush over a certain part, like her earring, you can still kind of make out there. You know, it keeps getting warped. Kind of still stays an earring, but it's, as you can see, it's applying its own version of the texture, which is dab. In this case, let's take a look at loose medium. Now if I go to, if I'm still on hue saturation, I can go right back over it. So whichever style you choose up here is the style that it's going to paint over. And if I go back to where I was deselecting here, so there's a lot of, I'll even go back to right here, so there's all the regular color and everything. So you can create some really interesting looks here. And the good thing about it is, like, I don't like that eye. Still don't like it. And this is a rather chaotic brush, so I can just go over things until I like the way they look. So I suggest, if you're going to get carried away with the art history brush, having a lot of different history states. But here's the tight short. As you can see, it doesn't distort it too much. It actually looks pretty cool. It's a fun tool to use. And this has a very painted look now. a strange tool, but definitely a useful one if you're doing something with a lot of stylization. Just like the art history brush is useful if you choose to think to use it. And there's a lot of other ways around it. It's like a preference if you like using the art history brush versus doing all this with, or if you like using the history brush versus using just different history states, or using doubles like put on top of each other. So we got that face right here. I can change the size of the brush. It's much less detail. Or I can just do it for certain areas. And this is still obviously the art history brush. So I'm doing just this for certain areas. I can make it really, really tiny for very fine areas. So definitely changing the size of it is going to give you really good results. So in the end I have this very painted look without actually using one of these corny filters. And that's how you use the art history brush. So play around with that, definitely. It's fun, and you can get a lot of cool effects you can't really with anything else. Make sure you're changing the size of it a lot. I think there's maybe one more option that we had here. I think it's just the area and the area. And the tolerance work like any other area tolerance setting. Here we have it set to 0. What if we set it to 100? So this would be Adobe's actual version of what tolerance is. If you just want to read that, it's kind of a little complicated. It kind of has a lot to do with edge detection or detection in general. So high tolerance limits paint strokes to areas that differ considerably from the color in the source state or snapshot. So that means if I have my tolerance jacked up to 100%, it's going to do more in the areas that are the most different from the state I've selected over here, like for instance right here. Anyway, that's the art history and the history brush. So thanks for watching, and practice with those. It's definitely a good skill to learn.